国阵、国盟和希盟早前都已经宣布了自己的竞选宣言，这无疑是争取选票的其中一个策略。不过，来自美国长期身在大马的政治学者凯斯认为，这一次各阵营的竞选宣言都太过大方。
Well, the first thing that I guess is that they should be made more realistic. It strikes many of us who look at these manifestos as, they just appear to be overly ambitious. They are too expansive. They are too generous. And in a word, probably unaffordable. And in consequence, I think that probably to make these manifestos better ones, they would need to be trimmed back in some way. And we know, for example, that with Malaysia just coming out of the pandemic period and the many measures that were adopted, the extensive borrowing and spending that took place during that period, we know now that the Malaysian government has relatively little fiscal leeway. So there's enormous pressure on its budgets. No matter who comes to power, they're going to face this kind of reality. There will be something of a manifesto reckoning, and they will find themselves, I fear, unable to deliver many of the promises that they have made.
另外，凯斯也表示，希盟和国阵宣言都有无法忽视的亮点。
Things like anti-corruption, good governance. I think about civil liberties, press freedoms, electoral reform, parliamentary reform, right? These kinds of institutional changes, enlarging the democratic space, perhaps, creating new opportunities, maybe for civil society. These kinds of recommendations. Plainly, Pakatan Harapan is streets ahead of the other two competing coalitions in this regard. So Pakatan, for them, these kinds of political or institutional reforms, strengthening civil liberties and the like, much more important to that coalition than to the others. And so, for example, when I think about anti-corruption, Pakistan's made a big deal, I guess, about declaring assets. So its lead candidates, are asked now to, say what they own, in order that we can see then the kinds of business involvement they might have, the stakes, the assets that they possess, and maybe any conflicts of interest that might arise from that. On women's issues, again, Pakatan Harapan says some interesting things here. One of its promises is to ensure that there is what they call gender inclusivity statements in all the legislation that it introduces. So if it comes to power and it begins to introduce, bills for consideration in Parliament, then, some concession will be made in all of this legislation for women. But what really stands out for me is the kinds of promises that are contained in the manifesto that come from Barisan Nasional. It looks to me, if I may say, that Barisan is ahead on this issue, at least in terms of the kinds of pledges and promises that it's making in its manifesto. So they have gone on explicitly then to say something about a women's economic development corporation that would bring additional, economic empowerment to women and aspiring women entrepreneurs. They have promised also, Barisan has promised also, to set up a women's economic development bank. I don't see any of these kinds of financial or entrepreneurial aspirations or ambitions there within the Pakatan Manifesto. Here's something else. Barisan promises to set up a women's public specialist hospital. So here's something that gives special attention to women's health issues. And again, I don't see that in the Pakatan Manifesto. And finally, a women's university. That's catches one's eye. And these are the kinds of concessions or promises or pledges that have been made to women that I would typically more closely associate with Pakatan. But no, in this instance, it's Barisan that's promising these things. So keenly attuned then to the women's vote. And that's interesting.